I'm so excited to be here, more than you can imagine, because I was at the Cannes Advertising Festival, and I had this perfect plan about how I was going to get here. I was flying from Nice to London. My flight was getting in at 4:25 London time, and the flight from London to Washington was leaving at 5:25. Problem is, my flight from Nice was half an hour late. And I don't know if you remember from your last time in Europe, you have to go again through security before you get on your plane. So despite my running, taking my shoes off and literally running, I missed the plane. And then I was ticketed on a 6 o'clock flight to New York, which allowed me to take the final flight from New York to DC. But because I was ticketed but not checked in, I missed that plane too. So by then I was beginning to think, swimming the Atlantic. And I caught the 8 o'clock flight, landed at 11, and had a car drive me here. And we thought, hey, it's going to be fantastic. There's going to be no traffic. We are going to make it in 4 hours. But in fact, you know what they do at night? They do construction work on the roads. So you end up like taking forever to get through what should be absolutely nothing because there's nobody else on the streets at that time. But I'm delighted to say that I arrived at my hotel at 4 in the morning, and I'm here now. That goes completely against all my evangelizing about sleep, which you may have heard about. I gave a TED talk called Sleep Your Way to the Top, literally. But now I'm going against my own ground rules, but I'm thrilled to be here. And for those of you who have not heard me before, this accent is for real. I say that because I joked recently that I was actually born in Fresno, and I had cultivated this accent to give myself an air of being an ethnic minority, which is very popular everywhere these days except in Arizona. And I got 27 letters and emails from people asking me, how exactly do you go about changing your accent? And 2 of them are from Fresno, which shows there's a certain level of gullibility that you marketers, I'm sure, are taking full advantage of. Actually, my accent has been kind of a bane of my existence for many years, especially because I went to school in England at Cambridge, and there, you know, having an accent is a major handicap. And it wasn't until I moved to New York from London and met Henry Kissinger that I relaxed about my accent. He actually said to me, don't worry about your accent. He said, you can never underestimate in American public life the advantages of complete and total incomprehensibility. Of course, my ex-husband had a different attitude about my accent. He gave me a very passive-aggressive present for my birthday once. He actually gave me a dialect coach to follow me around for 2 weeks and give me notes. And she wasn't just any dialect coach. She was Jessica Drake, who was a famous Hollywood dialect coach. She, for example, coached Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump. And by the end of these 2 weeks, I knew exactly what I was doing wrong, but I couldn't really lead a normal life and be able to speak properly. I was feeling completely paralyzed. It's not that led to my divorce, but I just wanted you to know that story. So I'm thrilled to be speaking to professionals who are taking all the new technology tools and trying to make them work. So before I talk about the tools that I find work the best, I want to talk about the megatrends. That when we tap into the megatrends, we have the wind on our back. Because the Germans have a word for it, Zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. And there is such a thing. And I know that the key to what happened to the Huffington Post and its growth has been tapping into these megatrends. So the first megatrend is about engagement. Will.i.am sort of summed it best. He said, we used to consume news sitting on the couch, and now we consume news galloping on a horse. We don't just consume it, we pass it on, we share it. And that's like a dramatic change in how we communicate with our readers and with our customers. And we see that it requires a very different attitude. It's no longer those of us in the media or in PR or in marketing sitting on top of Mount Olympus telling people how it is. It's everybody having a voice. And being able to listen as much as to talk is key to being a good marketer and key to being a good publisher. At the Huffington Post, from day one, 2005, May 9th, we prioritized comments. And we wanted to avoid the worst aspects of the internet, which are ad hominem attacks and people hiding behind anonymity. And so our comments were pre-moderated from the beginning. Even when we had no resources, I would pay my 2 daughters below minimum wage to get them to pre-moderate comments. Since then, we've invested a lot of money in the most advanced technology to pre-moderate comments, which we're actually thinking of white labeling, because it helped us grow our commenting community. We have had 260 million comments since we launched, and these are pre-moderated comments. And then one good thing that happens is that after a while, trolls realize it's not worth hanging around the Huffington Post because they are not going to be allowed through, so they go somewhere else. So over 90% of the comments are approved. And we've also invested in having 30 common moderators who are supplementing the technology. We keep educating the algorithm so it gets better and better, but it's still not perfect. So engagement is the first absolute key to any communication online, including for us. We launched HuffPost Live, which is 12 hours of programming on video every day from our studios in New York and LA. In fact, our economics correspondent, Arthur Delaney, is here with me, and he's one of the stars of HuffPost Live. Arthur, would you stand? He's very handsome and fabulous, but he's married. I'm just warning you. Happily married a year ago. And another thing beyond engagement is authenticity. You cannot just hide behind a press release and disappear. You cannot hide behind the perfect 30-second ad and disappear. You have to really be willing to be in the arena. You have to be willing to get the tweet about the Delta airline and respond. You have to acknowledge when, as a brand, you are making a mistake, and the faster you acknowledge it and apologize, the better it is for you as a brand. And related to authenticity and engagement is being able to be real time. What was one of the most successful campaigns of recent months was the Oreo Super Bowl campaign. What are the elements that made it successful? It was not planned, right? So the brand has created the kind of possibility that allows teams to make decisions quickly. Can you imagine some other brands? This would have to go through layers and layers of approval. The Super Bowl would be long over before they could have you can dunk in the dark, brilliant message. And also a team ready to execute quickly, a fabulous graphic. All that came together quickly. So the ability to respond quickly and take advantage of a real-time situation is absolutely key to your ability to communicate. And that requires building your company in a certain way that it can move quickly. Another campaign that was related to the message of authenticity, of course, was the Dove campaign that has been in 25 languages, the most watched ad about women and how they see themselves and how the world sees them, which is a whole other speech I can give you about about what I call the obnoxious roommate living in our head, putting us down every day. And we women, I'm speaking to the women in the audience for a minute, we just got to silence that obnoxious roommate. But again, the Dove campaign tapped into that, and women all around the world resonated because we recognize that woman who thinks that her most prominent feature is her bad chin or her nose or her hair, because we all think that about ourselves. And again, they tapped into that real vulnerability, and they did something different that really resonated and was a phenomenal success. So RealTime is one of these great tools, and of course it's at the heart of everything we do at the Huffington Post. And it's also being in the arena all the time. I remember in our second year, we actually started what is now known as native advertising. We had a big hotel chain blogging on the Huffington Post. It was transparent, it was clear that this was a sponsored blog. And the first comment, as luck would have it, was a negative comment, not nasty, not ad hominem, just a factually negative comment about an experience a reader had at one of the hotels of the brand. As you can imagine, all hell broke loose. We heard from the head of marketing, who I'm sure had heard from their CEO. This was a ridiculous place to be. I mean, those of you who are marketers trying to innovate, you're always going to be questioned. What are you doing in a sponsored blog on the Huffington Post in 2008? No, earlier, 2006. And then we talked to them and convinced them that, it doesn't matter if you're not in the arena yourselves. Your customers are going to talk about it on Facebook, later on Twitter. So you might as well be in the arena to respond, because you're not going to be able to silence them. So it's not like you could go back to the Mad Men world. I always incidentally wanted to be an opening act for Elizabeth Moss. It's not like you can do that and just simply get your own message out there. You have to be there to respond, both to the positive and the negative. And it turned out to be great for them, because they responded, the reader happened to be right, they apologized. Then there were other readers who came in and talked about their very positive experiences, and it all worked out. But it's a new way of understanding our role as marketers and as communicators. Another thing that we're discovering, everybody talks about the importance of storytelling. And you see, that's when we all light up. When we heard the story of the Delta airline, when you heard the story about my ex-husband and my accent. We all communicate with stories. But there is something else happening that is great to tap into, and that's moving from storytelling to story doing. Readers and customers and consumers want actually to take action. They don't just want to receive information, and they especially want to take action that can make a difference. We found to our amazement that when we launched a challenge to support nonprofits that create jobs, we called it our Job Raising Challenge. We were given $250,000 grant from the Skoll Foundation, and then we partnered with CrowdRise to raise money through our community. And we were amazed by how many people wanted to contribute. They wanted not just to hear about the stories of nonprofits and what they were doing, they wanted to be part of the solution. And we raised an extra $1.3 million from our readers in donations under $100. So storytelling to story doing is another big trend that you can tap into, especially when it is connected to making a difference. Arthur writes constantly about people who are left out of our prosperity, especially people in the middle class who are not able to make ends meet now. And he could give you the data, but it's not as powerful as telling you the stories. And giving the opportunity to people to tell the stories themselves. That's the other thing. You don't just have to have a reporter tell the story. Just provide a platform for people to tell their stories in text, video, pictures. That's for me what I love the most about the Huffington Post. I know we are a journalistic enterprise with 850 journalists, editors, engineers that won a Pulitzer last year. But for me, the most important thing is that we are a platform, that we have tens of thousands of voices. In fact, I want to invite all of you to write on the Huffington Post. I'm going to give you my email address, so you have no excuse. You can bypass the Huffington Post bureaucracy and email me directly, and you will be given a password, and you can blog whenever you want about whatever it is, your work, something personal. Again, the more personal we can be, the more we can reach people and communicate. So I have a very easy email address, Arianna, with one R and two N's, at huffingtonpost.com. And anything we do, including, incidentally, the stories that won the Pulitzer. David Wood wrote about the lives of returning vets and all the challenges they were facing. But at the end of each of the 10 stories, he had an ask to the community, asking them to send their stories about the vets they knew in their communities, so from the vets themselves, and tell their stories on video or text or pictures. And the stories that came in were even more powerful than the coverage our reporter did. So we don't do anything where we don't ask our readers to come back with their own stories. So another thing that is key, another key tool, is having like a sense of occasion, a sense of drama and playfulness about your communications. For us, that turned out to be the splash. Like those of you who go on the Huffington Post know that we have this kind of trademark splash, a big story, which changes many times a day, but takes the entire horizontal space. And at first, when we launched that, it was very counterintuitive, because everybody would tell you the more stories you can pack at the top, the more clicks you're going to get, because there are many stories for people to click on. We found out the opposite. We found that people loved the drama of the big splash, and they wanted to come many times to see, so what's the big story now? And then that they would actually click through to stories below the splash. But also we train our editors to be able to do great headlines. One of my favorites was when Dominic Strauss-Kahn was arrested in New York after the Sofitel hotel incident. Our headline was, OMG, IMF. When the Pope joined Facebook, our headline was Poke the Pope. And so we constantly come up with great headlines, and that's an art that we teach to any of our editors who are on the front page and on all our other sections, because we now have 70 sections. Because again, we started as primarily a politics and news site, but now the majority of our traffic, the majority of our engagement doesn't come from politics and news. We have 18 lifestyle sections, including parents and style and home and weddings and divorce, because we are realists. You know, we have a great wedding site, but hey, if things don't work out, we have a great divorce site. In fact, ironically, we launched our divorce site first. That was by accident. It was the brainchild of Nora Ephron, our editor-at-large, who sadly died last year. And she came to me one morning and she said, you know what? She said, we need to have a divorce section. Because, she said, marriage comes and goes, but divorce is forever. And our divorce section has kind of focused on how to co-parent. Because as anybody here who is divorced with children, as I was, knows that that is the key. How can you divorce and still be good parents? And the stories that people share and the way they can support each other in that journey is absolutely amazing. And then we tapped into another mega trend, and that's a huge mega trend that I'm obsessed with. And that is that people are realizing more and more that we are suffering from a stress epidemic. that people are burning out, that our workplace is fueled with burnout, sleep deprivation, exhaustion, and that's not sustainable. And I loved the story about, Draper in Mad Men, basically checking out, going off, and coming back and facing this big victory, because the truth is that very often, in order to tap into our creativity, in order to tap into the best in us, we need to learn to unplug and recharge. So we took all our 18 sections and put them together under the rubric, less stress, more living. So every one of our sections gives tips and information and help how to parent or divorce or get married or whatever, decorate your house with less stress. And in fact, we just had a big conference that we called Redefining Success, the third metric, beyond the first two of money and power. Because look around, and people who just see success in terms of money and power are basically sitting down on a two-legged stool. They're going to fall off. It doesn't work. The third metric, and we deliberately did not give it a name, because it consists of a few things. It consists, first of all, of our health and well-being. What's the point of being successful and rich if you're not healthy? And look around at the price successful people are paying. And I want to talk to the women in the room again, because we women are paying a heavier price. The data shows that women in stressful, successful jobs have a 40% greater threat of a heart disease and 60% greater threat of diabetes. Is that worth it? So here's the bottom line. There's been a lot of discussion recently about women breaking through glass ceilings, being 50% of everything at the top, and trust me, I think women can do anything. And as Ginger Rogers said, and they can do it backwards and in high heels. But our goal should not be to be at the top of every profession the way men have designed it. Our job should be to go in there and change the design. Because at the moment, I'm very glad to see some men applauding too, because you know what, guys? That's going to be the best thing that happened to you. Because the way the world of work is designed right now is not working for women. It's not working for men. It's not working for polar bears. It's just not sustainable. And it's not just about work-life balance and how can we manage being mothers and professionals. That's a small part of the debate. It's like, how can we manage to be sane, healthy human beings and professionals? So anything you can do in your work to tap into that, it's huge. 25% of corporate America now has gotten the message. This has gone way beyond California flakiness. And people have realized the connection between having healthy employees and a healthy bottom line. So 25% of corporate America offers some form of mindfulness training, meditation, yoga. I went to General Mills, and I forget Google and Silicon Valley. I'm talking about Middle America. And coming out of rooms in the hallways, there were executives coming from a yoga session. At the Huffington Post, we have 2 nap rooms. And when we first started our nap rooms, people would say to me, nobody's going to be seen going into a nap room in the middle of the afternoon. Now they're always booked. In fact, the other day I was going by a nap room and I saw 2 people coming out of it. And I thought to myself, whatever it takes to recharge, you just don't tell. Just don't tell HR. It's better than a cinnamon bar. And now that we are moving into new offices, Arthur, as you know, our new offices in Washington are going to have a dedicated nap room, dedicated meditation room, dedicated yoga room. And a bar, yes. Arthur is in charge of the bar. You see, it's going to take a while to bring the men along, but don't worry, they will. So that third metric, that is a huge mega trend, as I said, consists of our sense of well-being, then wisdom. How do we tap into our own wisdom? You know, in your profession, the key is creativity and innovation, right? It's not a repetitive task. You're not at an assembly line where you can do your job even if you are sleep deprived and exhausted. You need to be able to tap into your creativity. And that means learning to unplug from technology occasionally. You know, we have this illusion that when we are multitasking, we are efficient. We are not. Just look at neuroscientific evidence. Anybody here who is looking at their BlackBerry or iPhone while listening to me, you're not listening to me. It's like your brain cannot compute two things. It sequentially goes from one to the other. So you may have missed the best part I said. So I know my mother, the last time she got angry with me before she died was when she saw me checking email and talking to my children. And she said to me in her very heavy Greek accent, if you think I have an accent, she said, I abhor multitasking. And if you think of it, anytime we really love something, anytime we are in love, anytime something is truly important, we are there 100%. There is such power in being present 100%. And so if you look at the emphasis in the workplace about how many hours people are working, you know, somebody can come in at 7 in the morning and leave at 10 o'clock at night and be there 40% of himself or herself. Wouldn't you rather have somebody who comes at 9 and leaves at 6 and is there 100% and then can go home and recharge and come back in a creative way? So a focus on well-being and wisdom are actually performance enhancement tools. And there is now more and more evidence about that. And that's a great message that consumers are resonating to because they're beginning to see how it affects their life. And the third thing is the ability to have a sense of wonder about life. You know, so often we just are focused on where we are going in our careers, and we sort of miss the journey. You know, yesterday when I finally got on the plane, I looked out and there was just amazing sunset. And you know, everything, just all the stress fell away because I could focus on that and be in that moment. And that thing brings a lot of gratitude. And also the recognition that we are all on this boat and there is no real hierarchy, which is also a great part of digital reality. There is no hierarchy online. It doesn't matter if you're a famous person or a rich person or a beautiful person or a person with an accent. Nobody can hear your accent online. And what matters is, do you have something interesting to say? And I love that because I was brought up by a mother in a one-room apartment in Athens with no money, who had no sense of hierarchy, and she always made us feel abandoned. And I remember once when I moved to London, and I was dating a Conservative member of Parliament. It must have been a decision made during a moment of sleep deprivation. And one night, he brought Ted Heath, who was then Prime Minister, to dinner. And my mother was in the kitchen, she lived in the kitchen. And she was Greek, so those of you who know Greeks, you understand they live in the kitchen. And they have to feed you constantly. My mother, I'm sure, was convinced that if you don't eat every 20 minutes, something terrible is going to happen to you. So something went wrong in the kitchen. She had to call in a plumber. And so when the plumber came, she said to him, so what do you think of the Prime Minister? And the plumber said, not much. He said, he hasn't been good for working people. And my mother immediately said, let me go bring him in so you can tell him directly. You know, she didn't for a moment think that you don't bring in the Prime Minister to talk to the plumber. For her, they're both human beings. And online, we have this connection among human beings. It doesn't matter where they came from. It doesn't matter what they're doing. What are they saying? How are they connecting? And I love the fact that you can do that online. It's almost magical. In the summer, we had a homeless teenager write in our teen section, blog, a beautiful blog in our teen section. And the Harvard admissions office happened to read it and offered him a place at Harvard. And he's now at Harvard. I mean, I just love these stories. And we can make these stories happen because that's the magic of our new digital reality. Another thing that is really amazing that's happening is we all talk about SEO and search, but we've really moved from a search for information to a search for meaning. People don't want just information. They want meaning. They want to make sense of things. They want something that can make a difference in their lives and the lives of others. And that's why I think those of us in the media have a responsibility to actually not just cover what is not working, what is dysfunctional, what is corrupt, and there's plenty of that. We also need to put the spotlight on what is working, on the good that's happening, so that we can help it scale. That's why we launched a section which has become one of our most successful sections that's called very simply the Good News section. And it only has good news. And brands are lining up to sponsor it because they want to be associated with good news. And readers want to read good news, and there's so much good news happening, but the media is supposed to operate on the principle of it bleeds, it leads, and that people really don't care about good news. It's totally untrue. They really care about good news, but they care in a way that involves storytelling and connection. We also launched a section about job creation. There are startups everywhere in America that are actually creating jobs. It may be 1 or 2 jobs, but these are real jobs. So instead of just focusing on the crisis of unemployment, which trust me, we do a lot on, and Arthur is in charge of that, we're also capturing the great things happening and connecting people to work with each other. Because increasingly, every brand wants to be identified with a cause. Have you noticed that? I was in my hotel room a few months ago, and suddenly this ad came in that looked like an ad for the Peace Corps. It was about, is your life just about yourself? And then they had people doing noble things, and it was just this amazing sense that our lives had to be about more than ourselves. And do you know what the ad was for? Shiva's Whiskey. So I thought if Shiva's Whiskey tries to sell whiskey by connecting it with doing good and the better angels of our nature, given that marketers are often ahead of where our understanding of what is happening is, that is a big trend. And we've seen that at the Huffington Post. We have dedicated sections sponsored by brands around their cause. For example, Johnson & Johnson for the last 4 years has been sponsoring a dedicated section on global maternal health because that's their primary cause. And they realize, again, it's not enough to just have a big ad around it. You need to be in front of the customer, the consumer, every day with your story. So they have blogs from women around the world being helped. They have news, information, everything around the theme of global maternal health. A few months ago, Goldman Sachs sponsored a section called Small Business because they are spending $500 million supporting small businesses. How many people knew that? That's the problem. There's so much information around that unless you are there every day telling those stories, and they're amazing stories, women and men starting small businesses around the world and telling their stories in a relentless way. Right now, a lot of media is suffering from ADD, attention deficit disorder. We pride ourselves at suffering from OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. We like to take stories, take issues, and stay with them again and again and again, and develop it and evolve it. So I just got a sign that we only have 15 minutes left, and I really want to leave 15 minutes for questions and hear from you and about anything you want. So let me just wrap up by saying that there has been tremendous emphasis on the financial capital. And I think we need to add to that an emphasis on the human capital. Because when we take care of our human capital, we'll be able to take care of our financial capital. And when we take care of our human capital, we'll be more likely to take care of our social capital because we'll be more creative, more innovative, and we'll be able to do the things that capture the moment and capture people's hearts and imagination, because ultimately